Not a penny, not a dime. Stand lawyers, not this time. Not a penny, not a dime. Stand lawyers, not this time. Not a penny, not a dime.
We want Pacifica to ditch Jackson Lewis.
Who is Jackson Lewis?
Jackson Lewis is, according to the AFL-CIO, America's #1 union-busting law firm. They advertise that they give seminars in union prevention practices, in avoiding ADA complaints, and in running union decertification campaigns. In these times, investigations have exposed that in their seminars they tell employers to lie to their employees about what it means to join a union. They've been sued by their own clients for telling them to break labor law. And we think a progressive organization has absolutely no business handing over listener donations to a firm like that. And the concern here is that what these firms do is they try to rack up as many billable hours as possible by encouraging their employers to take a hard line with their unions. Our experience at Pacifica has been that most grievances can be worked out. Until now, Pacifica has rejected every single grievance we've brought to them over the past year and a half over the most basic things, like basic workplace safety issues, things employers should want to sit down at the table and work out with their employees.
So do you think that they're trying to bust the union here at KPFA?
I don't know what their intentions are. The first thing they told us was that they're not using Jackson Lewis for any labor disputes. Then in a public written statement, Arlene Engelhardt, the executive director of Pacifica, admitted that they're using Jackson Lewis for arbitrations and that they've put it on a general retainer. We have contract negotiations coming up in less than a year. And our concern is that if Pacifica's management is taking its cues on how to deal with its union from Jackson Lewis, it's going to be very bad for the unionized staff here at KPFA.
Now, when was Jackson Lewis hired by KPFA or Pacifica?
Pacifica's insurance company brought Jackson Lewis in to handle a lawsuit that had exceeded its deductible, I believe 2 years ago. I could be wrong on the timing. At some point after that, Pacifica started hiring Jackson Lewis to work on lawsuits where it had discretion about what law firm to use. And then somewhere around a month ago, they hired Jackson Lewis on a general retainer to deal with employment issues. So now they're their go-to people for all personnel issues.
When they were hired, was there any opposition on the Pacifica board to their being hired?
I don't know. I've never been on the Pacifica board. They deal with legal matters.
Do you know if any board member opposed their hiring of Jackson Lewis?
Well, I know that when they were put on a general retainer, many national board members were opposing that decision, yeah.
So there was a vote against the hiring of Jackson Lewis on the board, national board, Pacifica board?
No, clearly the vote in support of hiring Jackson Lewis prevailed, or we wouldn't be protesting now.
Well, you could have a minority.
Yes.
Were there any minority
vote against it?
Oh, there was a minority vote against it.
For instance, Laura Privis, who's one of our staff representatives on the KPFA local board and the Pacifica national board, made very clear that she's voted against it and is eager to get Pacifica to ditch them.
So when they were hired, was there any vote against it? Them being hired?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, because there's different tiers. The national board voted to put them on a general retainer. That's when we know there were dissenting votes. We don't know if there was a board vote when they were hired by the insurance company to handle that lawsuit, or if there was a board vote to put them on other lawsuits that Pacifica had discretion over.
And is the union supporting this picket line?
Yes, absolutely.
So you're going into negotiations with KPFA and Pacifica. What are the issues that you think are important for the union to address in the upcoming negotiations?
Well, that's something for the bargaining unit to decide.
Well, what issues do you think are important?
Well, we haven't had a raise in 4 years now, which means we've effectively taken a 12 to 14% pay cut because of inflation. I think we need to clearly strengthen some of the protections in our contract against retaliation, some of the protections for free speech by employees at KPFA.
Are you optimistic?
About the contract negotiations?
About the general situation?
I try to keep my hopes high and my expectations low.
Got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Jackson Lewis has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Jackson Lewis has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Jackson Lewis has got to go.
Libby Sayer from CWA.
Hi everybody, my name's Libby Sayer and I'm here from CWA District 9. And I'm here with the same concern as everyone else. We've got to get rid of Jackson Lewis. There are many employer-side law firms that this station can use. They are not obliged to use Jackson Lewis. And one of the pieces of misinformation and disinformation coming out from from management is we're trapped in elaborate long-term contracts. We can't escape. Our insurance carriers making us use Jackson Lewis. They are using Jackson Lewis on retainer for general services, legal services. They are not just using Jackson Lewis for litigation. They will try and characterize this as no change at all. This is a major change. They will fend off criticism by saying, we haven't had Jackson Lewis at the table with the union. They haven't had a chance. Our contract at KPFA has not yet expired. When that contract expires, Jackson Lewis will be at the table to smash the union. Eileen Engelhardt, in her disingenuous statement that I have before me, cites the extraordinary generosity of our listeners. This is one listener who's done being generous. I will not, I cannot fund union busting at my local community radio station. And I hope all of you will seriously consider the same. There's no excuse for this. We don't tolerate it from Walmart. We don't tolerate it at Dow Chemical. Why should we tolerate it at our own community radio station, KPFA? Say no to Jackson Lewis.
We don't is aligned, and you know, it's like a Berkeley Klan meeting type of thing. This is the faction at KPFA that does the most. This does the most to oppress black programmers, brown programmers, labor programmers, immigrant programmers, prisoner programmers. You know, so I know that they're acting like this is a union dispute or something like that, but majority of the workers at KPFA aren't even protected by the union. Like myself, if you put the pen over there, majority of the people over there are white because that's who KPFA seems to hire the most, and we're 80% of the unpaid workers. We're not represented, so I don't see this as my issue.
So you don't think that this is a legitimate picket line?
This is not a legitimate picket line, and they're not a legitimate union. You know, I mean, that's the only union that people from management could shop steward, and they can just switch back and forth between management and shop steward of this union. So it's, you know, it's kind of like a political theater, I guess.
Are you surprised that some of the people who supported the police being called on Nadra Foster are picketing here at this station?
Well, that's why I exactly call it political theater, because Nadra Foster, Sasha Lilly, it happened under the regime of, hold on, let me do the interview. Can I do the interview? And then we can talk. But Sasha Lilly was in management. She was the interim program director when Nadra Foster, a black programmer here, was beat and hogtied by the police. And yeah, it's very interesting that her and her husband, the publisher of PM Press, I think his name is Ramsey or something like that, all these like fake progressives. So, you know, I'm just watching it. And like,
that wasn't on the news at that time when the police came in here and beat her up.
No, that never made the news. And to be totally honest, KPFA basically the case got dropped, to be honest. Although out of all of the lawsuits at KPFA, that should have been the lawsuit to stick.
News reporter here at KPFA, and I'm Tina Bachemin, and I'm a news reporter here at KPFA, and I'm here to voice my support for the union and their concerns about this law firm, Jackson Lewis. And
who is this law firm?
You know, I'm not too sure who they are. I know that they have a reputation for union busting. Other than that, I don't know a lot about them, but I'm standing with the union and their concerns.
You know when the firm was hired?
No.
I think it was in 2009. Do you think that this indicates that KPFA and Pacifica are kind of in a union busting drive to get rid of the unions here?
You know, I think it's a concern. Yeah.
What other evidence is there that they're trying to break the union here?
Well, I'm not a union person, so I mean, I'm just supporting the union. That's why I'm here.
Oh, so you're not a member of the union?
I am not a member of the union, no.
Are you part of the unpaid staff?
I am part of the unpaid staff, yeah.
Well, I mean, do you feel that there is an effort to break the union here?
I think that, you know, there's just a lot of unsavory things that are going on at KPFA for the 2.5 years that I've been here. I think that, you know, there's a lot of problems between Pacifica and its relationship with the workers and KPFA, and
that seems to be the history of Pacifica and KPFA.
Pacifica, and you know, so this is just the time I'm here, so this is where I'm standing.
And the union is supporting this picket line. Are they calling this being out? Is that how you heard about it?
Yes.
So you're supporting the union workers here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, what's your name again?
I'm Tina Bachemin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jackson Lewis has got to go. Hey, hey.
Yes, because Jackson Lewis is a well-known and rather infamous union busting firm.
And what does that have to do with KPFA?
KPFA has unions and it has labor issues, and along with several cases, the one thing I can talk about is they were hired in general to give advice as to labor and employment policies.
And why would KPFA hire or Pacifica hire Jackson Lewis?
Beats me.
Do they have any labor issues at KPFA?
I'm not going to comment on any labor issues because I don't think they have labor issues in general at all. I think there are some specific cases having to do with people, and I'm not going to comment.
Have they been used? Have they been used in any labor issues at KPFA?
My understanding is they have been, yes.
Oh, so they have been used in labor grievances at KPFA, Jackson Lewis?
I'm not on the Pacifica National Board, and if I was, hi there, we've got some dogs joining us, and if I was, I would not be free to discuss that anyway. These are private matters.
Do you know if there was any opposition? Do you know when they were hired, Jackson Lewis?
Hold on a second, I believe 2 years ago. When was Jackson Lewis first hired? 2 years ago?
Yeah.
2 years ago.
2010.
And do you know if there was any opposition on the board to them being hired?
Again, these...
No, I'm not talking about the Pacifica National Board.
The local board?
No, they're hired, I understand, by the Pacifica National Board. Yeah, was there any opposition at the Pacifica National Board for them to be hired?
All those discussions were held in executive session. I am not a member of the board, but if I were, I would not be able to discuss what was discussed in executive session.
Are you for members of the Pacifica National Board firing this firm?
I am, yes.
So you're for the members of the board firing?
I am, yes, absolutely.
So what in general, do you think that there's a union busting drive going on here at KPFA and Pacifica?
Absolutely not.
What's going on then?
Oh, is there a union busting for drive? I don't know what's going on. Actually, I take that back. I misunderstood your question. I don't know what's going on here at KPFA. It is, it's very complicated. You can raise your eyebrows at me all you would like. It's very complicated.
Well, I mean, you've been involved quite a bit in KPFA.
Yes, but in terms of KPFA's involvement with staff, we seem to have a dogfight going on. In terms of KPFA's involvement with staff, I think that there is a great division amongst staff themselves. There are a lot of very complicated problems here. And I think that using a firm such as Jackson & Lewis does nothing to resolve problems, it only exacerbates them.
Well, this is...
I'm not done. And given what we're supposed to stand for, I don't think hiring a union-busting firm is really at all an appropriate route to go. It is the antithesis of what we are, in my opinion. Or at least it should be. Apparently, for some, it is not any longer the antithesis.
Well, there's a ongoing kind of internal battles at many levels at KPFA and Pacifica. So this is part of the continuing epic at KPFA and Pacifica?
I think it's taken a very unfortunate turn. I think it's taken a turn where we could be associated with the worst of corporate America. I think this is a turn that would say that we are trying, corporate America, what's going on with our economy? The rich getting richer and so forth, and the workers be damned, and people cut out of jobs, cut out of any kind of economic resources, and it doesn't really matter how you do it. That sort of attitude and mentality, I'm afraid we're beginning to buy into with the hiring of this particular firm.
Do you think that's been reflected in the programming at KPFA and Pacifica?
Do I think that's affected in
that's affected the programming at KPFA and Pacifica?
I think that in terms of the programming at KPFA and Pacifica, I think that's another problem altogether and another kind of political finagling. I do. I think there is some mode to get rid of people who know what they're doing on the air. I think there's a misinterpretation of what community radio is. You know what community radio is? It's a community, a small community, like Berkeley, California, like Santa Cruz. It is not Santa Cruz to Sacramento to Fresno. That's our community. Every community in this world is included in that. So what does community radio mean? We are not a community radio station.
So what changes would you like to see to make it a community radio station?
I don't want to make it a community radio station because it's impossible to make it a community radio station. A community means one more or less homogeneous group. We have a huge signal that covers every single kind of community you can imagine. Are we going to have a half an hour for every ethnic group you can think of, every nationality? Because that's every religion. That's about all we could possibly do if we were going to cover our community meaning where our signal reaches.
So are you for
false?
So are you for
community radio stations? We're talking about tiny stations with tiny signals.
So are you?
We are a public broadcasting station, and we ought to do a good job of covering the issues that are of concern to the majority of people, and not the corporate media does very well in representing corporate interests. The interests of real people, the 99% people. And we have a lot of issues in common. We don't need to be broken up into tiny minuscule groups and separated from one another.
Well, are you for removing those programs like on Native Americans or blacks or Latinos? Do you think those programs should be removed from the air?
I have not considered anything having to do with specific programs, and no, I think there are certain large communities that ought to have designated programming, yes, that are fairly large, and I think that the issues, that every attempt should be made to show how specific things affect people in different ways. But that's not what the issue is amongst people at KPFA. The issue is that there are those who happen to think that because your skin is a certain color, therefore you're a good broadcaster. No. There are plenty of good broadcasters in whatever hue of skin you would like to find.
So on the issue,
there is a difference between a good and a bad broadcaster.
On the issue of programming, okay, on the issue of programming, there used to be a programming council that was eliminated. Are you in favor of the reinstitution of the program council, or you want the present situation to continue?
The program council consists of 3 or 4 management type people from KPFA, 3 or 4 unpaid staff people, and 3 or 4 local station board people. Invariably what they do is they break down into their individual factions and fight with each other. They really don't represent anything but their factions. They do not represent anything.
Is there a program council now at KPFA?
There is not.
Are you in favor of reestablishing a program council?
Personally, no.
We're happy to have some.
So who should make the determination on programming?
I think actually that management should be making the determination of programming, and I think they should, I think if we have good management that understands that we need good programming that addresses the issues that most of us in this world are actually facing with the kinds of changes that are being instituted both in our federal government, our state government, and our corporate America that influences all of that, that we will all have very good programming. And I think that it does affect different communities differently. I want to know that. I want to learn that. I want to hear from people within those communities. They do not need to necessarily all be my talk show hosts.
Are you unhappy with the present management at KPFA?
I am, yes.
So you think they should be removed?
I don't really want to comment on that. I think that we are about to shortly get the announcement of a new general manager permanently, and let's leave it at that.
Were you unhappy with the previous manager?
Was I unhappy with the previous manager? Yes. And, well, no, the previous manager was... We had several layers of interim managers. What are you talking about when you're talking...
Lem Lemmerheel?
I was not happy with her either, no.
So there seems to be a continuous history of problem with management at KPFA.
I think KPFA is probably the worst place to be a general manager of that I could think of.
You think that's going to change with a new manager?
I think whoever that person is, they have a hard lot, and they have a really hard time because there are so many factions.
of the KPFA local station board.
So what's going on here?
Well, there's a demonstration called by the CWA local against Pacifica because Pacifica retained a union-busting law firm called Jackson Lewis to represent a foundation in some cases that were not union-related at all. And I think that's to me, there's a little bit of manipulation going on here. I don't in any way approve of Jackson Lewis. I think Pacifica did a really stupid, bad thing by retaining these guys. But I think people need to understand the circumstances. It's not union busting. They were hired to defend Pacifica against a couple of individual lawsuits, not for union negotiations or grievances or contract negotiations. There have been 5 contracts since this relationship with Jackson Lewis began, and they had nothing to do with any of those negotiations. What's really going on here, I think the CWA has a lot of gripes with Pacifica and KPFA because of some layoffs that were, in my opinion, fiscally necessary. I mean, there just wasn't money to keep on paying the inflated paid staff that we had. There had to be some layoffs. Pacifica did them in line with the contract. CWA objected. I understand why. Nobody likes layoffs. But the NLRB has ruled now in a whole slew of cases that the grievances were not justified and that the layoffs were done in accordance with the contract. But what's happening here is that they're using this Jackson Lewis thing, which I agree was a stupid move on Pacifica's part, but it's being exploited, in my opinion, to as part of this CWA attack on Pacifica and Pacifica management. In my opinion, I was in CWA twice in my life, when I worked for the Newspaper Guild and also when I was a machinist working for I was in the United IUE, the International Union Electrical Workers, which has since been swallowed up by the CWA. And frankly, I think the CWA has a lot better things to be doing. They should be sticking up, going out in the streets for the AT&T workers and the Verizon workers who are getting really badly screwed, instead of making. I mean, I think they got a legitimate gripe. I have a gripe too. When I found out about Jackson Lewis, I was appalled. But this kind of action here, I don't think really moves the situation forward at Pacifica. It's just part of their political attack on the Pacifica Foundation, and I'd rather see them use the time and energy that went into this, standing up for the AT&T and Verizon workers, who are the ones who are really getting screwed.
Well, you were a CWA member of the Newspaper Guild of the Chronicle, and you were discharged because you took a sick day to support a demonstration. Why don't you talk about that, and what did the CWA do at that time? Did they have a picket for your defense?
No. It's a mixed bag. I mean, I'm grateful in a sense, appreciative of CWA because they did file grievances on my behalf. And as a result of those grievances, I ended up getting a financial settlement and a pension and health care and a bunch of cash.
What were you fired for?
I was fired in 2003. The occasion for it was that on the day that Bush began the shock and awe attack on Baghdad, I went out in the streets, got arrested, and so on. I had warned my editors. I had warned them. I told them in advance I was going to do that. They didn't have any problem with it. I told them I might get arrested, and if so, I'd come back to work when I got out of jail. That's exactly what happened. Nobody had a problem with it, but they used it as an excuse to nail me. In my opinion, the real reason was that it's kind of a funny story, but I had been a golden boy at the paper. They kept giving me raises and praises and all kinds of stuff because I was writing about technology. I went to, the year before, I had gone to the Gaza Strip while I was on vacation with the International Solidarity Movement. I wrote one column about Israel and the Palestinians, and all of a sudden I went from being a golden boy to being in all kinds of, I can't say it on the radio, but the poop list, shall we say, okay? And they just used, when the demonstration thing came up, even though my editors had approved in advance, they used it as an excuse to get rid of me.
Well, did the CWA, Bay Area-wide, have any rallies or defense campaign for you?
I started to say it's a mixed bag. They did file grievances, but they didn't do anything with, rank and file action or anything like that.
Nothing like this today?
Nothing like this. And the you know, the real effect of something like my firing was actually on the other workers more than me, because I mean it really has a real chilling effect on anybody else. And if you step out of line, you exercise your rights as a citizen, you can get fired. And so it wasn't just a one, you know, sticking up for one person, although I would have appreciated that. It's really sticking up for all workers in the guild and other workers, and that's what they should have done. But you know, the way the guild functions at the Chronicle, maybe I don't know how it is now, but you know, the kind of workers advocate kind of within management circles. So the representative of the guild kind of works with management every day on their little issues, and they do kind of advocate for the workers. They advocated for me, and I appreciate that. But what they've lost is the whole tradition of labor, you know, workers sticking up for themselves and taking concerted collective action, whether it's a picket line or a strike or whatever. That's all ancient history. They've unfortunately abandoned that whole tradition, and it's really that kind of action is what gives labor its power, not just having some guy sitting there at the table. Well,
it sounds like it's back here at KPFA then.
Say again?
That action is here at KPFA then.
Well, yeah, they are doing it, and but I just think they're doing it on a very funny basis for, you know, I think really manipulation, because you know, for whatever else you can say about Pacifica, and they've made a lot of mistakes in my opinion, but I don't think they're busting the union. You know, they've as I said before, they've negotiated 5 unions since they entered into this relationship with 5 contracts since they entered the relationship with Jackson Lewis. They didn't use Jackson Lewis for any of those negotiations. So you know, there's a very litigious atmosphere at this station and this network. People are constantly suing the station. Some people for good reasons. Some people very opportunistically trying to soak some money out of the thing. And apparently, what happened? I wasn't part of it, but apparently the board got tired of it, and they felt a couple of these lawsuits were just completely bogus and groundless, and they were tired of paying out money to buy off people with no legitimate grievance. So they wanted to hire some tough lawyers, and they hired Jackson Lewis. I think it was a mistake, but that's the context, and people need to know that they weren't being hired, and they haven't been used to bust the union or in any way to harm the workers here at KPFA.
And what's going on here today?
A lot of people are very upset that Pacifica has gone and hired a union-busting law firm to deal with the issues that they have with their own workers, rather than just talking to their workers, who over and over and over give back to the station, give lots of time and extra energy and devote themselves to the station, and who would welcome a sit-down just to talk about how we could all work together.
Do you know when this firm was hired?
When it was hired? No, I don't know the date.
Do you know if there was any opposition to it being hired by anybody on the national board?
To be honest, no. I don't know. The national board seems to want to do whatever makes it difficult for us to run our station at local control, with local control.
Do you think they're trying to bust the union here?
Absolutely. A lot of the folks say they want it to be an all-volunteer station. They are anti-people that handle themselves professionally, whether they're working for a wage or not, but people deserve a wage and have a right to a wage, and the idea that they could do good work and shouldn't be able to get a wage is disgusting to me, and they've been working on busting this union for a very long time.
Are you concerned about the programming at KPFA and any change in the programming?
You always have to be concerned. That's what we're here for, is programming.
Are you in favor of a reestablishment of the program council?
I'm not sure what a reestablishment means. We did vote to have a program council. The board has put forward a program council proposal. The IGM said it's not really going to work, and so we said, would you bring us back a proposal of how many people and who you think they should be? And that has actually never happened. So this is a problem. But in terms of the programming, you know, we would like the morning show back.
What about more labor programming on KPFA?
Well, I've always wanted to see more labor programming. I'm a laid-off member of AFT. I'm a former adult ed teacher and would like to see more programming about adult ed. You know, but there's a lot of programs in place. There's a lot of, you know, that arranging that has to be done. It has to be discussed. To just hire law firms to say, we don't care what you organized workers say, and we're going to spend all the listeners' money trying to stop you from doing your job, that's crazy. We need people willing to sit down at the table.
Are you disturbed that there are no black people on this picket line?
We'll be
black youth or any black person?
I'm not sure what if it's the time of day or the, but you know, I don't think that that means that black people don't support the morning show and don't support the majority on the board because they voted for the majority on the board, just like everybody else voted for the majority on the board.
At KPFA, or it's at Pacifica, what is your response to this picket?
Well, I think it's misdirected, to be quite honest. The case in point does not actually have anything to do with unions whatsoever, and whether Jackson Lewis is, in quotations, a union-busting organisation, I frankly don't know. They're not employed to have anything directly to do with unions, currently certainly. They represent the foundation in cases related to litigation on other matters. I also point out that it was a Pacifica Foundation, not KPFA, that selected this company. It has operates in states where the 5 stations are. It has nothing directly to do with KPFA. And finally, you know, Pacifica owns KPFA. It owns 5 stations. It owns the 501c3 license. It owns the FCC license. We do business as Pacifica. So they're the boss. I had nothing to do with the hire. Whether it's a good one or a bad hire, I'm not going to comment on that.
And so why do you think the union is having a picket here today?
Well, to be honest with you, the union has a right to picket, but I think they're misinformed. I think it's misdirected, to be quite honest. As I said, the union the company concerned has nothing to do. It's not breaking any unions. It's representing the foundation in a way which was probably going to save the foundation a lot of money, because we're up for we're constantly being attacked, I would suggest, by disgruntled staff people and constantly in this situation. For instance, KPFA, in terms of unions, we have the CWA. We've had to fight 5 cases from our CWA. They've gone to the National Labour Relations Board. One of them went as far as the National Labour Relations Board, and we won 5 cases, 5 out of 5. So it seems to me that these cases are to some extent frivolous if we won 5 of them, and a better way to negotiate would be to negotiate, to mediate, and talk about these rather than go to spend a lot of money that these people are complaining about. We don't want to spend the money. It's the opposition really that are spending the money, I would suggest.
What's going on with AT&T workers?
AT&T workers are at the bargaining table now, struggling for a contract. AT&T is one of the most profitable corporations in the United States, made $20 billion in profits last year, dodged $14 billion in taxes from 2008 to 2010, and they're demanding concessions from AT&T workers.
So they're without a contract now?
We are working without a contract now, ready to strike at any time. We'd rather do it at the bargaining table. We're waiting for AT&T to do the right thing. There's no reason for a single AT&T worker to have their standard of living reduced when AT&T is making $20 billion a year in profits.
Well, Verizon workers are also working without a contract.
That's right. Verizon workers on the East Coast are working without a contract. Here in California, our Verizon contract doesn't expire until next year.
Well, since these AT&T workers are working without a contract, are they going to be going out on May 1st with other workers?
They are at work without a contract, but many will do their very best to support the Occupy actions and have been around California.
I'm talking about a strike on May Day by the AT&T workers.
I can't discuss strike strategy with you. I don't know.
Do you support May Day actions by workers?
Yes, we do support May Day actions by workers.
But you don't know whether they're going to go on strike on May Day?
Management should not know whether they're going to go out on May.
Thank everybody for coming out. As some of my old CWA friends know, I spent nearly 30 years working as a CWA rep and organizer in the Boston area. Closer. Shall I start over?
Yeah, sure.
My name's Steve Early. I spent nearly 30 years working for the communication workers in the Northeast, in the Boston area. And before I retired 4 years ago, one of my last assignments was to work with CWA Local 1400, which represented about 150 workers in Somerville, Mass, next to Cambridge.
Right.
Yeah. And they did telemarketing work. As a group that had progressive pretensions like KPFA, had a lot of clients, did fundraising for feminist organizations, environmental organizations, Democratic Party politicians, even a few unions. And in that last round of bargaining that I worked with those workers on, who did that employer hire? They hired Jackson and Lewis. Now, let me just tell you what the practical implications of that were for 150 people trying to negotiate slightly better pay and benefits and better working conditions. The Jackson and Lewis lawyer from their Boston office dragged us through 55 negotiating sessions over 18 months. Ran up a bill, billable hours, worth more than $200,000 for that corporate big law firm. This was $200,000 that came out of the wage settlement that we were finally able to get for those 150 underpaid telemarketing workers. So I think this story is relevant to this situation. Once they start running the meter on this station, Jackson and Lewis will take them for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in billings, and that will come out of the pay and benefits of the workers. It'll affect staffing levels, and it's going to affect the quality of service to the community that KPFA supposedly serves, and hopefully will continue to serve with the help of the union activists who are here today. Thank you.
I see is this issue is part of the epic struggle that's going on now across America to smash unionism and wage war against workers.
That's right. That's right.
Whether it's an attempt to take away collective bargaining rights of the public workers in Wisconsin, or an attempt to block SEIU janitors and maids from organizing in San Francisco hotels, this issue of whether a law firm with a reputation for union busting should represent Pacifica is part of that same struggle for worker rights and dignity. So remember that an injury to one is a concern of all. Stay smart and stay strong.
Yes, coming.
Jackson Lewis has got to go.